This podcast contains spoilers for the movie Don't Look Up. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cinephile Gamers podcast. I am your host, Bo Smith, and today we're going to be talking about another Oscar movie that we just recently watched, my wife and I, and it was Don't Look Up, which you can watch on Netflix right now. And this was a decisive movie for the two of us. And it's something that I really liked, but she did not like. She's not a fan of the disaster movies. But I will say this did leave me with a weird feeling, but I will get on to that later on in the episode. So, Don't Look Up. It is directed by Adam McKay, who you might know from other movies like The Big Short, Vice, or some of his earlier work like Anchorman and Step Brothers. So, he has had a big career change, still keeping a lot of comedy elements in his movies, as you can definitely tell from Don't Look Up, but a lot more political overtones for these types of movies now. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, Cate Blanchett, Jonah Hill, Timothée Chalamet, and a bunch of other famous people. I mean, this is a major star-studded cast, and it is very entertaining in the way that they all present their roles in this movie. And you can definitely see a lot of similarities between certain former presidents, maybe certain current presidents as well, but we'll jump into that here in just a second. This film is nominated for Best Picture, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Original Screenplay. We'll dive into those topics here in just a second. So just a basic rundown of what this movie is about in case you haven't heard of it, don't know anything about it. It starts off with Jennifer Lawrence's character. Her name is Kate DiBiase, and she has recently discovered a comet that is flying through space, and as she reports her findings to her mentor, Dr. Randall, who is played by Leonardo DiCaprio, they learn that, according to the math, that it is on a course headed towards Earth in about 6 months' time. So they alert the Planetary Defense Coordination Office, which, funny enough, is a very real office, and it's mentioned right in the beginning of the movie, which, side note, I like that Adam McKay in his last few movies, whenever he's talking about real life things, that he does put it up on screen like, yes, this is a very real thing. I'm not making this up. But anyways, DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, they go out and they warn the corporation, and they're like, hey, there's this comet that's coming towards Earth. And they start taking the matter seriously. So they get a interview with the president, and they sit down with the president, who is Meryl Streep, and her son, Jonah Hill, who is her chief of staff. And it's a very funny relationship that they have. But as they're warning them about this, they're like, it doesn't matter. We're just going to keep this quiet and just see how this goes. We're going to investigate this on our own. So the entire time, like, you can't be serious, right? This is a huge deal. You have to act on this now. So they brush off DiCaprio and Kate, and they go on ahead and they start going to these media circuits where they're like, hey, we want to get this out to the press. Maybe they'll take it seriously. So they go on to a morning TV show, and they're like, hey, we found this comet that is heading towards Earth. And the entire time, the TV show hosts are like, that's funny. Is it going to hit my ex-wife's house or something? And they're not taking it serious at all. So Jennifer Lawrence just breaks down on TV. They're like, no, this is a very real thing. We are all going to die. And so it starts to trend, but of course, with any reactionary type of piece that you see in media nowadays, it gets memed on. And so they start making fun of her. But Dr. Randall is actually then invited back into the White House, and they're like, hey, we looked at these numbers and you are correct. We are going to actually help out with this. But there's an ulterior motive behind it, since Meryl Streep is only using this so she can become president again. And there is the basic gist of your movie. So, and there's a lot of going back and forth in between, like, hey, how serious should we take this? How serious should we not take this, sort of thing? And it just seems like there's a minority of people who are just like, yes, this is dangerous. We should really focus on this. And then there's a majority of people who just don't really even care about what's going to happen, and they're just acting like it's not a huge deal at all. So, going into why this movie was made, Adam McKay said in an interview recently that how he came up for this idea for the script was because he thought that the climate crisis was a huge deal to him, that he was so surprised not many more people are taking seriously. So he's just like, am I the only one that's going crazy here? And that was the basis of his script. And that probably could have been the only allegory for this movie if COVID hadn't happened right after he had started producing this movie. So it really does seem like something that could be applied to the climate crisis, COVID-19, anything that you want to touch base with. Another hint of this movie is that the political nature of how officials and the media do not take this seriously is very, very shockingly accurate to what we've experienced in the last 10 years probably. I have heard from a few people that they think that the government portrayed in this movie is very representative of the Biden administration. And I've heard from a lot of other people that they feel like it's representative of the Trump administration. I don't want to get into too much of what I believe in politics, which, funny enough, this is an extremely political movie. And there's no denying that. If you don't want any politics in your art forms, in your movies, video games, anything like that, this is not the movie for you to watch. It is very political heavy. It is very media heavy, and it's a very frank representation of what our society looks like today here in America. You see that from the government politics of everything, the media politics, the meme culture, a lot of representation of like what being rich and powerful will get you into the future, how there are people that influence others with money and how that's more important than human life. And it's one of those things that if it wasn't true, this would be a very funny, like, oh, this is never going to happen. But if you've ever seen those memes in the last couple of years where like disaster movies seem so unrealistic because we'd have a much better response. Yeah. After COVID, you're just like, no, this can very much happen. And you do feel that with this movie. We're like, yeah, if an asteroid was headed towards Earth, we probably wouldn't do anything about it. All right, so let's take a look at what this film is nominated for. Like I said, Best Picture, Film Editing, Original Score, and Original Screenplay. As far as film editing goes, as I mentioned previously, I don't know what it takes to actually make or break it in this category, but there were a lot of points where there's some frequent jump cuts into the next scene, then it would go back to a previous scene. It's very distracting. There's also moments in there where the action pauses for a little bit, even though audio is still going. And I know it wasn't like a lag in my system. It was very intentional, and you see that with like pictures in the movie as well, but it's very disorienting. I really didn't like it. To me, it took me out of the movie a little bit. Original score, I did like the music in this movie. I thought the music was chaotic in the early scenes. A type of bebop jazz is what it would typically be called, and it was very somber in the more serious moments of the movie. Nothing really unique, though, that stands out for this music or very thematic about it in the music as well. Original screenplay. This is, to me, what may win original screenplay. It's a very close tie between that and King Richard for me, which I'll discuss on the King Richard podcast. But as far as original screenplay goes, it's a very good satire of what you would see in a doomsday movie, of our current politics and society. And I think overall a very funny movie that also portrays a very strong message as well. So if this doesn't win screenplay, I will be very shocked, because it is pretty darn good, and it's one of Adam McKay's better works. I didn't like Vice as much. I thought it was neat, but not really something I cared too much, and I think this is a much stronger movie than both Vice as well as The Big Short too. Now, as a comedy, first and foremost, this movie has a lot of great moments in it. Too many jokes that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but a couple of the characters I really enjoyed that were kind of the wacky ones. Ron Perlman is also in this movie, very small role, but he's touted as America's hero. He's going to be the one that goes up in space and kind of like a Bruce Willis movie is going to destroy this comet and save the planet. But he spouts the most racist, horrible stuff in the entire movie. And then as a joke, people are just like, he's from a different generation. He can't help it. And so they just kind of excuse this sort of behavior. And it's one of the really funny parts of the movie. And then you also have an allusion to what I assume is going to be your Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg type of character, where it's this rich tech guy who has his hands in a bunch of different projects, but he owns this phone company first and foremost, and then he wants to actually take the comet. Oh, spoiler warning right now, because this is halfway through the movie. He wants to take the comet and has found out that, hey, there's all these resources that are worth billions and trillions of dollars. So we can't destroy this comet. We're going to, what I suggest we do is we take some detonators whenever it gets closer to the earth. We launch them up there, and then it'll break down into smaller pieces, and we can still farm these resources that will just put us ahead of the economy and all these other markets available. So it's really funny just to see how, money talks. And like I said before, human life is essentially valueless. I think one of the other interesting aspects about this movie, as I mentioned before, is the social media aspect and how that plays out into our day-to-day life. I mean, you can see it very early on in the movie whenever he's going into the talk show host and they're trying to warn people about the comet. You see Leonardo DiCaprio's family going like, oh yeah, he looks so good on here. And then like you hear their phone go off and they start paying attention to whatever other thing is playing on here, and they're just like, hey, have you heard that these celebrities broke up? And they're like, oh, that's really sad, that sort of thing. And so it kind of gets minimized by just the what's important in our social and celebrities' lives, and not so much about the hard-hitting news. That kind of leads also into the media coverage aspect of the movie, which I thought was very, very spot on. As someone who has done broadcast journalism, is very familiar with that industry, that it is just sensationalism. The news only wants sensationalism. What's going to be the 10-second clip that you can use as an audio for playback later? And then what's going to be what gets us clicks and traffic to our website, traffic to our station. The more views, the better. So it's something that is, as soon as your 5 minutes are done, it's on to the next thing. It does not matter what's going on now. Something else equally important is about to happen next. So since I've already covered a couple of spoilers from the movie, what I want to go ahead and do is kind of examine the rest of the movie and give my thoughts on it. So spoiler warning, if you have not watched Don't Look Up yet, go ahead, pause this podcast, take some time to watch the movie, then come on back and listen to this. So as we mentioned before, the tech guy who has found the resources in the comet is just like, let's not blow up this comet. Let's let it get closer to the earth and we can farm resources from it. And so what was going to be initially the nuclear strike on this comet is called off. Everything is called back. And so the team of Kate DiBiase and Dr. Randall are broken up because Dr. Randall is headed on to an important position as appointed by the president. And so she can still look good since he's one of the people that discovered the comet, but also he can also be held on a leash and doesn't get too out of control. Well, as the movie goes on, Dr. Randall is realizing, look, there is nothing that this president is going to do to help out. She is only getting this to get more voters for her reelection later on in the year. And so there's no reason to keep working for her. In fact, he kind of breaks off this team in the middle of another news coverage. And I wrote down the quote that Leonardo DiCaprio gives in the movie, which I thought was very powerful. And that was, if we can't agree about the comet the size of Mount Everest hurtling its way towards us is not a good thing, then what the hell happened to us? And I think that is such a powerful quote in the movie, that if we can't agree on just the basic fundamental facts of certain things in life, then what's the point? Why are we even continuing on with this? We might as well just end up in oblivion. Now, you don't realize this, but I cut out like a solid 30 seconds of silence in this podcast because I just had a small existential crisis. So moving on with the rest of the movie. A couple weeks away from the meteor striking, both Kate and Dr. Randall get this huge support from a vast majority of the world in regards to, hey, look up. There is this comet that is in the sky and you can actually start seeing it come this way towards Earth. And so like, just look up. Tell your leaders that, hey, we want this comet destroyed and we don't want to die. And then from Meryl Streep's point of view, her brand messaging is don't look up. There is no comet. You don't need to worry about it. We're going to be fine. And then this is very Trump administration like, but you see all their supporters wear hats that say don't look up and just start bad mouthing everyone on social media that says, hey, if you believe this, you're an idiot. Don't even try to fight this president. And so eventually their supporters do look up and they say, oh, there is a meteor coming towards us. You've been lying to us this entire time. We want to be saved. But money is still talking from the tech guy in the movie whose name escapes me. Peter Isherwell. That's his name. So Peter is still like, no, I still want to get these resources from this comet. And so Meryl Streep complies with this, and they are launching their mission. And as it's being launched, you see Dr. Randall and Kate's new boyfriend, who is just this dweeb played by Timothée Chalamet that tries to act like white gangster, but is really just a sweetheart. And it's a very funny scene later on in the ending half of the movie. And so they are reconciling their differences and just like, hey, we might die. This might be our last night on Earth. And so Dr. Randall goes and makes up with his wife, who he had been having an affair with over the course of the last 6 months. And as he is welcomed back in the home, and they start eating a dinner together and just start having all these random conversations going as this comet is heading towards Earth, and they've turned off the TV, any radios going on, so they don't get notifications at all. And as this is going on, the president's mission to send detonators up to the comet is going extremely wrong. I think they sent like 40-ish something spaceships, and a few had crashed on launch, and then a few more did not reach the comet. And so there's like 26 spaceships left. And as soon as a couple of the detonators go off, it knocks all the other spaceships off. And so it's not enough to destroy the comet. And they realize this, and they realize we have to get out. And so luckily for them, and about 2,000 other rich people in the world, they have this rocket set aside that's supposed to put them in a cryogenic sleep, and they look for the next inhabitable planet. And she does call Dr. Randall and is like, hey, if you'd like to come on here, I thought you did a good job and I was wrong. So you can bring up your wife or someone else you care about, and you can escape with us. And Dr. Randall's like, no, I'm just going to be with my family for this. And so he doesn't say anything to his family, but you do start to hear commotion outside where the world is going crazy. And it leads to this very chilling and somber moment in the movie, like the most heavy hitting serious moment of the movie, where everyone goes around the table, starts talking about memories that they had together. They're gratefuls of what they did in their life and everything else. And then as the comet is closely approaching, they're just like, I don't know, should we pray or something? And then Timothée Chalamet's character, who grew up religious, is like, I'll do it. And it's this very nice, touching moment of like, all these people who have very different opinions, different beliefs, all just come together, and they realize like, hey, what's the point of this? It no longer matters. So we might as well just put our differences aside and be with each other and maintain the last little bit of humanity that's left. It's, like I said, a very somber moment, very sad moment as the house starts rattling, and then the comet just comes in and wipes out everything. That ends the movie. As you see the rocket just going past the comet and escaping with 2,000 people, it ends the movie. And then you start to see credits roll a little bit of just the different things that represented the characters through the movie, and names pop up and the whole shebang. Very sad. But there is a post-credits sort of scene where however many years later, they're awoken from their cryo sleep and they land on this planet. Everyone's buck-ass naked, and there are too many dongs hanging out that I'm comfortable with seeing in a movie. But Meryl Streep comes out with Peter, and they're like, yeah, this was a resounding success. We still have a majority of our people who survived on the passage, and everything should be good. And early on in the movie, Peter has this thing where it predicts how people are going to die. And Meryl Streep is like, I want to know how I die. And so he's like, you're going to get killed by a Bronterock. We don't even know what that is yet. And as they're walking around this planet, you see Meryl Streep's tramp stamp on the president, which is just a funny image. And they're like, look at all these beautiful creatures, this beautiful land. I think we're going to be able to survive. She goes up to pet a creature and then just gets eaten to death. And someone goes, what the hell is that thing? And Peter goes, I think that's what's called a Bronterock. Make sure not to touch those. It's one of those movies that really alleviates some of the stress from the movie, and that that both Mackenzie and I got a major laugh out of that kind of set our spirits a little bit better. But that's the end of the movie. Not a happy ending for anyone, I'd say. But overall, a solid movie that really represents kind of current day political media climate, how we act as a society, how we let our differences erode us, and how we just let the most trivial of things divide us when what we really should be doing is coming together and whatever major problems in the world we face, whether you believe in the climate change crisis, whether you believe in COVID-19 or pandemic related health issues, we should come together and fight together on these things. That way we can continue to preserve humanity. That's what I drew from this movie. And if you don't feel that way afterwards, I really don't know what to say exactly. I feel like it does have a powerful message of let's come together as a people and try to stick together against whatever odds we face, because together we're a lot stronger. So what's my final consensus on Don't Look Up? I would say it's a very good movie overall. Leaves you with a really sad, strange, weird feeling at the end that makes you uncomfortable, but overall a good movie. It's worth a few watches. Definitely, since it's on Netflix, you can watch it anytime, and I'd suggest watching it again. I'm going to give this film a 8 out of 10 on my score. I really think it has a lot to it. It's got a great message. As far as what it's going to win, definitely original screenplay. It's one of the top contenders for. Maybe has a chance at original score. Not 100% sure on that. Film editing, no go. Best picture, maybe. We'll just see. Still got a few more movies to review, so I'll give you my final consensus maybe once I get either the 9th or 10th movie done. Well, guys, thank you again for joining me on this podcast. I really would like to know your thoughts, so just make sure you can continue to listen. Eventually, I think I'm going to get a Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee subscription, so if you want to have discussions with me, we'll be able to do that maybe soon. Otherwise, I would love to just have you continue to listen to the podcast. If you want to reach out to me via email, you can always just email me at the cinephilegamerspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a really good comment, I would love to include it in the next podcast that I do. That way we can continue to have these sorts of discussions. And since Mackenzie couldn't be with me, her main point that she wanted to bring up in the movie was, what are those bangs on Jennifer Lawrence's head? And I have to agree with her. It took away from the whole movie. In fact, give it a 0 out of 10. Jennifer Lawrence's bangs, they ruined the movie. Thanks for joining me again, guys. Can't wait to see you at the next podcast.